This is Dr. Karen, and you are listening to the Facto Leaders podcast on the B Podcast Network, where I share up-to-date, evidence-based practices, my own experiences, and guest interviews designed to help pediatric therapists, educators, and aspiring school leaders design services that support social, emotional, and academic growth and set kids up for success in adulthood. Whether you want to learn effective strategies for your therapy session or classroom, be an influential leader on your team, or find creative ways to use your skills to advance in your career, I've got you covered. Hey everybody, it's Dr. Karen, and welcome to episode 202 of the De Facto Leaders podcast on the B Podcast Network. A good leader knows how to protect their staff from initiatives and fires they may need to put out on a regular basis. In many cases, if you're unaware of everything your school administrator is dealing with, it means they're doing their job well. This lack of awareness of what happens behind the scenes may mean little appreciation for everything administrators are dealing with. While negative perceptions exist towards teachers and other school staff members as well, the public tends to be even more unforgiving towards those in leadership positions. Yet, despite all the negativity, I'm optimistic. Part of that is because of the many conversations I've had with public sector leaders. When you remove the parts from the whole and speak with the individuals who are part of the bigger system, it's easier to see past the politics and have an appreciation for the work being done. That's why I'm highlighting impactful clips from 3 past interviews focused on the struggles of school leaders, as well as what's possible when we put the right supports in place for students, teachers, staff, and the people leading them. These interviews feature discussions on the impact of social media on the perception of education and shedding light on the behind-the-scenes challenges of principals, the importance of positive adult role models in shaping kids' beliefs about what's possible for their futures, the power of K-12 education in creating life opportunities, using meditation to decrease disciplinary write-ups and increase your own creative problem solving, and how to use the 85% rule to support your mental health and show up for your students. The interviews featured in this episode are episode 114, Do School Leaders Need Coaching with Dan Kelly, a former principal from Rhode Island, episode 128, Using K-12 Education to Create Opportunities and Find Your Calling with Dr. Joseph Williams, who is a principal and former special education teacher. And finally, episode 124, Meditation for Educators and the Art of Giving 85% with Danny Bauer, who is also a former teacher and principal and currently runs a mastermind for school leaders. These original episodes all were really great interviews, so definitely check the show notes for the links to the original interviews as well as the guest bios so you can learn about all of these amazing guests. Also, be sure to check out the School of Clinical Leadership, my program that helps related service providers develop a strategic plan for putting executive functioning support in place in collaboration with their school teams. I am a huge proponent for planning and pacing your year and being really strategic. And I think that sometimes we need to zoom out and focus on the macro rather than the micro, which I know is really challenging when you're somebody who is working directly with students. So really being able to focus not just on what you're directly doing with your students, but also the big picture plan you have for how you're going to design your services, as well as collaborate with your teams and even engage with parents and families. So when we're thinking about executive functioning, all of those things are really important. Of course, you provide a lot of value with your direct intervention and instruction, but you can amplify that and put essential components in place when you think about getting the whole team working together, which is so essential when we're thinking about supporting students' executive functioning. Because really, in order for students to get the support they need, we need to make sure that there is scaffolding in place throughout the student's day, and we gradually fade that prompting so that we can increase students' independence. And that is really a team effort. That's what I show you how to do in the School of Clinical Leadership. You can learn more about the program at drkarendudek-brannan.com/clinical leadership. Now, please enjoy these clips with Dan Kelly, Dr. Joseph Williams, and Danny Bauer. We're going to start off with a clip from episode 114, Do School Leaders Need Coaching, with Dan Kelly.
A lot of the materials are going digital now. So when you think about updates to materials, it is easier in some respect to make updates to things when you're not dealing with print materials. So you don't have this textbook that's out of date because the district couldn't purchase new textbooks or something like that. I mean, updating a textbook takes a long time, but doing it digitally is a whole different animal, for better or for worse. So I'm interested to see how that affects things. And I don't know if it's going to make those types of scenarios easier or not, because you're still dealing with humans, but being able to update the materials is another factor that plays into all of this.
We're moving to, so by state statute, we have to have an approved science curriculum in place, I think by 2025 or it's 2027. And there are no approved programs out there to even choose from right now.
Gosh.
They can't build them fast enough. And so we're looking at Open SciEd as something we're going to pilot potentially next year. And they only have like one unit written for the three subject areas right now, and they're getting through it as fast as they can. But that's a huge challenge. And so with it being open source, it is going to be neat to see how much oversight there is going to be into some of those materials that might get used.
Yeah. I mean, even if you have a tech team, and if you're doing things digitally, it still takes time and resources to do that, especially if you don't know what the approved curriculum is.
Yes. And so with that we're in year 1 of a new English curriculum, we're in year 3 of a new math curriculum, and then next year we'll start piloting science. So we have a lot of change happening right now in Rhode Island, among other things, graduation requirement wise, that have really thrown a challenge to us. Mandating world language, mandating computer science, mandating algebra 2. So we've got some interesting things we've got to get in place, starting with the class of 2028.
Yeah. There's a lot. So I'm curious so there's all of this stuff we're so many different skills and things to keep up to date on. And with the coaching conversation and dealing with things like imposter syndrome, there's a whole different conversation we can have about that. But with the coaching models that you have used in the past, is there a framework for dealing with imposter syndrome, whether it be a principal or a teacher? How does that fit into the mix?
I think that everybody goes through that scenario, that thinking, in their at some point early in their career. I think a lot of the principals that I've worked with that are first year, second year principals, they're so overwhelmed with the management and the day-to-day components of everything that I'm not sure they get to that to the imposter syndrome maybe quite yet. But when it comes to coaching through, it's trying to, I'll start off a coaching conversation and say, all right, Karen, what do you want to focus on? What's your challenge today? What do you want to tackle? What do you want to get better at in these next 30 minutes or these next 45 minutes? And really trying to get them to focus in on that one little piece that we can try to work on to make their lives a little bit easier. And with these early career principles, a lot of it is just around load management and trying to get through all of the decisions and things that are coming. So if we can get them to focus in on that, on one thing, and have them come to a solution that they're going to try, then we've kind of chipped away at that a little bit and helped to improve them.
Yeah. I can imagine that it would be difficult to pick one thing. I always have a hard time with that question when people ask that, where it's, I have 50 things.
Yes. It's really about, you got to get it narrowed down to one, because I want them to walk out with a couple of resources or a couple of strategies to try going in before we're going to meet again. And in our plan, in our program with the principals in Rhode Island, we're meeting about every 2 weeks in an ideal situation. So it's tough to, we're not designed in a way where we're getting a lot of daily or weekly feedback. So some of the issues that we might be tackling, might be what's affecting them for tomorrow, or it might be something larger, like we're going to talk about, how to redo the master schedule so that, more kids have access to AP courses or something like that. And that might be something that we're going to tackle over multiple sessions. But usually we can find something to get them to narrow down and get through for that session.
Yeah. I feel like whenever I'm asked that question, I always am like, can I sneak in one or two more things? I never want to commit to just, even though I know, it's counterproductive, because
it is. Yes.
You spread yourself thin and you don't really ever get one thing done when you're doing too many things at once.
And sometimes that's just maybe that's the question right there.
Yeah.
How are you delegating your work with your assistants or with your leadership team so that you don't own everything?
Yeah.
That's a common one right there. Just because we're the leader doesn't mean we own it all. We have to make all those decisions.
Yeah.
But it's tough, because at the end of the day, the buck stops with you and everything's going to go through you at the end of the day. So that's a tough balance.
It is. And where a lot of the people that I'm working with, the idea that they can delegate is a mindset shift, because a lot of the people that I'm working with, maybe they're a supervisor to the special ed staff or the therapist. But a lot of times, if they're a therapist, they don't technically have direct reports. So the idea that you might actually be able to delegate things is a shift for them. The whole idea that, well, you might have things that you want to work with your students, but maybe you could train the teacher to do something in their classroom that could eliminate some of the things that you're working directly on with your students, or train the teaching assistants. And then the idea that if you focus on that and focus on training other people in what you do, then that actually takes work off your plate, even though there's a time commitment up front. So that's a shift that is sometimes difficult for people to make, because there's usually some kind of an immediate hair on fire thing that seems more urgent than that, even though that's going to actually make things better in the long run.
And I think in my building, I think we've got a good support network where my staff are my special ed teachers, therapists. I'm thinking about my school psychologist.
Yeah.
They have that power to go to the department chair and say, hey, this isn't working for me. Can we try X, Y, and Z? And so, yeah, they may not have that direct report to place something onto their table, but there are other staff that we can utilize. Even if it's us trying to get a secretary to take some paperwork off their plate to free up time. And so I would encourage people, you've got to ask, you've got to be able to go to the principal and say, hey, this isn't working. Can we sit and do a brainstorm and try to figure out ways to put some supports in place? And I think oftentimes people are afraid to go to the principal to go say, hey, I'm overwhelmed. They don't want to look like a failure. They don't want to look like they're weak or that they can't do their job. But I would prefer people come forward and say, hey, this isn't working. Let's try to brainstorm.
Mm-hmm.
But I have that principal title. And so nobody wants to go to the principal's office ever as a teacher, as a kid.
Kind of a negative connotation.
Yeah. And it's a tough thing for some folks to overcome.
Yeah, I think, I've been pretty fortunate in my experiences with principals. I remember one of my coworkers, we're at parent teacher conferences. This is when we're having this conversation. So it's October. And she's like, I've already cried in Kelly's office 3 times this year. That's the principal, where we could do that in our building. And she was really good about, if there was a parent who we're having a challenging situation with the parent, we knew we could go to her, and she was really good with dealing with that confrontation. And that's just, I think it really took time to build that trust with staff, so people knew that they could do that. And yeah, I mean, I think that it's not always like that. I didn't ever cry in the principal's office, but I definitely remember going in there being like, listen, I got a lot going on now. I just want to let you know that this is what's happening. And I hope it's not affecting my performance, but let me just share what's happening so I can give you a heads up.
I think post-COVID, I'm seeing more people coming forward saying, "Hey, I'm struggling. Hey, this isn't working for me," and I'm glad. I think that's one of the positive things that's come out of COVID. And as I think people are recognizing more, they're overwhelmed. And I've never seen too with staff so many challenges outside of just their little teaching world, and family members getting sick and cancer and different things. It's a lot to manage. And I am amazed every day how some people come to work and keep it all together and are still making an impact on kids with all of the things they're dealing with when they leave the school doors at 2:00.
Yeah. And like we talked about social media before, and I think maybe it depends who you follow and how often you're on and what platforms you're on, but just the perceptions of people who don't have any background in education, the perceptions of things going on are just, sometimes you see the posts and you think, I would love to just tear apart that thing that person just said, but you know what? I'm going to go on with my day, even though it's infuriating. And the problem is that those posts get a lot of attention because they're controversial, and they say something that's a straw man argument or that's just clickbaity, and it's frustrating because then it gets ideas out there and people don't really know the whole context.
Yeah, definitely positives and negatives to the social media side of things. What's that the statement? If everybody went to school, so they're all an expert on how schools should be run. And there's a lot of things happening in states across our country right now involving, whether it's curriculum or state impact of state testing. There's a gentleman, a former principal down in Texas that I follow with, and he's constantly posting stuff to push back against what the governor is trying to initiative the governor is trying to push down there. So I try to keep some balance. I follow some things on social media. I try to stay focused on the people that I know are going to make me better and stronger, as a leader and as a coach. And but it's easy to go down that rabbit hole. And I want, there's also a part of me too that as a leader, I want to know what they're saying so that I can be proactive to attack it. But it's it can put you in a bad place. So you definitely have to have a thick skin in this teaching profession right now.
You do. And I agree with you that it is really important to know what other people are saying, but I think also just to really listen to what they're saying, because there might be something to it. I mean, there might be something where if you really listen to their objections, that maybe you might be able to overcome them. Or I think that some people are too far on one side of an argument and you're never going to be able to convince them, but there's always those people, and I think this is probably the majority of the people, who are just confused. And they're not really on one side of an extreme, but they're just like, I don't even know what to think. I don't know what's going on, especially if they don't have an education background. I just remember like when my stepdaughter, when we had the initial parent orientation, they're talking about how they had to cut all of these programs because they had budget cuts, and so they had to rearrange the way that they're doing the field trips, and they're like, we really need parent volunteers, please sign up for all of this. And then there was just voting with those types of things with different initiatives that are going to affect our taxes. And just again, the perception of how it comes across to people who aren't in the schools, where it sounds like they're saying, oh, well, we don't have any resources. But I'm like, yeah, but they're actually doing really well with the resources that they have. They're being very resourceful, and they're asking for help. They're trying to find ways they can reach out to the community. And so, to me, I'm like, I'm happy to, vote for the thing that's going to raise my taxes if it means that we don't have to cut junior high sports, or we don't have to cut all these extracurricular programs that are going to be above and beyond the core curriculum. And I'm a core curriculum person. I'm a literacy person. So, I'm always like, you got to have the reading curriculum. You have to have that, but they can't benefit from the reading curriculum if you don't have all these other things. I mean, that's the whole point, is to prepare you for those things.
It's a tough balance. And, in my town, I've sat on those budget hearings and listened to, the folks that are struggling to make the rent and pay the bills, and, a tax hike, can impact them significantly.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
But then I also hear, but we moved here for the schools, and our buildings are falling apart. And I don't have my building is 60 years old, which is nothing compared to some of the other buildings in Providence and Central Falls and other parts of the state that are 100 and 120 years old that are still being used. And it's, nobody wants to put money into those facilities. And for years, it was just kick the can down the road. And now we're sitting here and people are upset because the bathrooms are falling apart. Well, it's not like we haven't been telling you the bathrooms are falling apart. We've been asking for that, but it's not been a priority to invest money into capital, type projects. And that's a common theme across the country right now. And now we're in a crisis scenario where we've got to make some serious investments into infrastructure, not only schools, but roads and bridges in our state as well.
Yeah.
And that is going to have an impact on people. It's got to come from somewhere, because we can't not have them.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I think that it is always good. I mean, if you're in a position where you're educating the community, I think that where I've seen people, I don't know, maybe not handle it the way that I think it should be handled, is when they get mad at people for having objections to those types of things. And I don't think you can get mad at people for having questions about, where's my money going? I mean, if you approach it that way, you're never going to be able to get on the same page with someone.
Yeah. I think that respectful dialogue and discourse, I think, has been lost a little bit in our country. And we go right to yelling and pointing fingers instead of being able to sit down and have a conversation. We've lost that art a little bit. And I think part of that is because of social media, because we can hide behind, we can post something, and I'll say something on Twitter that I would, never say to grandma. Yeah. And so, we have that conversation every day with a kid. Why would you say that about Johnny? You wouldn't say it to his face, but why would you put that there? And but we've got adults in our communities that are doing that exact thing. So we definitely have a challenge ahead around civil discourse, for sure.
I'm going to take a quick break here to talk about the School of Clinical Leadership, my program that helps related service providers design programming and interventions to support students' executive functioning in school settings. Social skills groups are often seen as the entire intervention, and when they're delivered this way, they're often done in an academic format where an adult is leading the session and kids are answering questions or discussing various social rules and scenarios. This is a very small piece of what needs to happen. When we think of social skills intervention as just a lesson plan or social skills group, kids get really good at answering questions about how they should be acting in hypothetical situations, However, they often don't transfer any of those things over to real life. This is because real social interactions are not academic situations. We're actually not working on the skills preventing kids from using the information and knowledge we're trying to give them. In other words, we're not building the executive functioning skills kids need to be successful in social situations, not to mention other areas of life. Before you can successfully implement social skills intervention, you need to have a solid understanding of what executive functioning is, both the internal skills and the external behaviors, what successful intervention looks like and who needs to be involved, and what service delivery models can effectively address executive functioning. This is exactly what I show you how to do in the School of Clinical Leadership. In the program, you'll learn why kids continue to experience anxiety or behavioral challenges even though they're going to therapy or have a behavior plan, common mistakes multidisciplinary teams make when teaching executive functioning, and how to correct these mistakes, why kids struggle with problem solving and friendships even though they're going to pull out therapy and social skills groups, and most importantly, how to help your team work together to figure out solutions to all of these things. If you are in a related service provider role, if you're a speech pathologist, social worker, counselor, psychologist, occupational therapist, or other professional on a school team supporting students, you can emerge into a leadership role on your team and help to guide these interventions. I help you do that in the School of Clinical Leadership. To learn more about the program, you can go to drkarendudek-brannan.com/clinical leadership. Now we're going to move on to a clip from episode 128, Using K-12 Education to Create Opportunities and Find Your Calling, with Dr. Joseph Williams.
Yeah, so I have a pretty unique story. I'm the second oldest of 6 children. My mom had me when she was 18, so I'm not even her oldest child. So, statistically speaking, as a Black man living in America, I shouldn't be on your show right now as Dr. Williams, an educator for the last 29 plus years. But I just feel like, education gives you options. And my mom, even though she made some, choices that she might want to take back, just really was like, hey, this is the hand that life dealt me, and I'm going to make sure that my children have an opportunity at a much better life than I had growing up. And she was very clear to us that if we wanted to not have the kind of life that, she had early in her life, that, K-12 education was the key, and that would give us options for our life. And it was 6 of us, and we all believed her. We all believed that, yeah, we can do something with our life, and we can make something out of our life, and it will give us options. And I was really heavily influenced by my youth pastor, who also was an attorney. He had a beautiful wife, he had a beautiful life, and I wanted that life. And so for me, it was like, hey, I'm going to be an attorney one day. So I saw that in him. He was the most positive Black male influence on my life growing up. And so everything I did was geared toward going to law school. And I was a pre-law major. After I graduated from high school, I was a pre-law major. I actually ended up getting accepted in every law school that I applied to. And I really thought I was on my way to law school. But my last year of college, I had the opportunity to sub. I was only taking like one class every semester to graduate, and had a lot of free time on my hands. And somebody was like, hey, you can make some money subbing. And it's like, I never thought about that. And so just start subbing, and man, it was just like, I was like a fish in water. Like, I'll tell you, no one has ever had to teach me how to manage a classroom, right? Yeah, I had to learn the pedagogy and all that once I got into the profession. But in terms of me, hey, like, you need to sit down and you need to, like, nobody ever had to tell me that in terms of dealing with kids. And so it was just something that was just natural for me, whether I was subbing in an elementary classroom or a high school classroom, it didn't matter. And I always connected and engaged with the students. And so obviously, the principals and the teachers that I was working with were like, hey, you need to get in this profession. We need you. And so it's like, no, I already got my path. I know what I'm doing. I'm on my way to law school. But, with each passing day and week and month, I was like, man, I don't know. I need to think about this. And, there's an old saying, if you want to make God smile, tell him your plans, because he might have other plans. So I guess he had other plans, Doc, because I will tell you, I said I was going to defer law school for a year, and I guess I'm still in deferred status. It's been 29 years. So got into it and, really enjoyed it. My first 11 years, I was a special education teacher and really loved working with students that needed additional support and provided that support to those students. I was also a head coach in basketball and an assistant coach in football, and was able to touch young men's lives through those sports. Really enjoyed it. And truthfully, the only reason I ended up getting into administration is I just need to make more money, if I'm being
Yeah.
honest. So,
Uh-huh.
after 11 years of working as a teacher and coach, I became an assistant principal for 3 years. And I've been a principal for the last, 14 years, 13, 14 years. I lose count now. So,
Yeah.
it's been a great career. And I'm saying it like it's over because it's definitely not over when you have a 9-year-old. But
Yeah.
but yeah, so far it's been a great career. I'll put it like that.
Wow, I have so many questions. So how important was it for you to have a positive role model? Even if the career that your role model had, it steered you in a direction and then you got steered in another direction. But I mean, do you think that was part of the path for you and getting you in the direction that you're in right now?
That's a great question. Yeah, again, like I said, I grew up. I'm originally from Kansas City, Missouri, and yeah, I just didn't have a lot of positive role models, and he was probably the only positive role model in terms of an education path.
Yeah.
I had, my pastor at my church. He was a truck driver, and didn't see myself driving trucks.
Mhm.
So, I did have. I don't want to say I didn't have any positive male role models, but he was the role model that just took me totally out of the environment that I was
Mhm.
used to seeing. And it was like,
Yeah.
wow, this is possible. And I was born in the 60s. So this is possible for a Black man to do this. And I'm like, okay, I feel like I can do this. And so because he actually, like you said, he kind of lit the path for me and said, hey, by my actions, you can do the same thing because I'm no better than you. And he would always tell us that, like, if I can achieve this, you can achieve this. And so I really followed his path pretty much to the T because he was also in the military. I joined the military. Like, I mean, there were so many,
Mhm.
similarities in my path and his path. So yeah, I think when young people are young, we can really imprint on them as adults. And sometimes that's a good imprint, like I'm sharing now, and sometimes it
Yeah.
can be a negative imprint. And so I'm fortunate in that, I had a very positive imprint on my life, growing up with my youth pastor.
So obviously, as you said before, your mother had a big influence on the way that you think about things and the way that you pursue opportunities. What things did she do to make sure that she reinforced that idea?
Yeah, she was very, very strict. I don't even know if her methods would work in 2023, but I mean, she didn't have any other choice. In my opinion,
Yeah.
looking back on it, hindsight's always 2020. But her first four children were boys. And my
Hmm.
mom's 5'2" on a good day. So
Yeah.
we were literally all taller than her, bigger than her, stronger than her by the time we were 10, 11, 12 years of age. And so she just had to be tough on us, having four boys, four Black boys, growing up in, basically, the inner city and in Kansas City. And she just had to be tough on us and make sure that we were doing what we need to do, so that we didn't get caught up in all the things potentially that we could get caught up in. And so,
Hmm.
yeah, she was just very, very adamant about America being a ladder to climb. No, America's not perfect, but America is a ladder to climb. And if despite whatever your beginnings are, if you're willing to get a good quality education and do something with your life, then you can have a good life. And I'm so grateful that when I think about all six of us, we all believed her.
Hmm.
It's six of us, four of us are in education. The other two have been successful in, business, working for corporations. My oldest brother that she had at 14, I mean, he ended up owning his own Allstate agency
Wow.
until he sold it here recently. So she really had a very positive impact on us. And I actually wrote a book about her. It's called Mama Put Us First. And I'm happy to share that.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, because it really, I think far too often we honor the people that have impacted us the most. after they're gone. And I wanted to honor her while she was still living. And so, yeah, I wrote a book about her and her impact, not just on me, but all six of us and how well we've done in our careers.
Yeah. I can't. So what was your day to day like? I mean, you've got your mom has 6 kids and is trying to, instill all of these things into you and make sure that you are spending your time in a way that's positive. We've got school and then you've got after school time. I mean, what did your day to day look like when you were growing up?
Yeah, a lot of it was truthfully was without her being there. I mean, my mom ended up having to work 2 jobs most of my upbringing. I would say maybe unfairly, a lot of the responsibility was put on my oldest brother. He was 4 years older than me, and I'm the second oldest, so he was a lot older than my other siblings. And so, yeah, a lot of times, he was the one that was watching us, making sure that we were doing what we needed to do. So I would have to give my brother Carl a lot of credit as well. But yeah, we just made it work, and she just, really instilled upon us that things have to be done systemically. And, we weren't allowed to go out and play until we did our homework, and we had to make sure that we did it our best. My mom said, I'm not expecting you to get 100%, but I'm always expecting you to give 100%. That was one of the things she used to always tell us. And so, yeah, and that's actually stuck with me even until this day. Like, I just believe that, and I share this with my own children, that you have to give 100%, and if 100% means you make an A, great. But if it means you make a B, that's okay as well. So just do your best. And so she's always instilled that in us. And I think that has stuck with me even to this day. I always say that, as adults, we're just, older versions of our younger selves. And so this is how she raised us, and it still impacts me even to this day. And I'm in my 50s.
Yeah. So transitioning over to the work that you have done as a special ed teacher and as a school administrator, how did your early experiences influence the way that you think about the student population that you're serving and the way that you lead your staff? I guess we could talk about your time in the classroom first and some of the things that came up there in the communities that you've worked in, and then transition more to the leadership.
Yeah. So, I mean, in terms of being a teacher and working in special ed specifically, obviously I was dealing with a lot of students that look like me. And so it really, I feel like it was God's work, to be honest with you, because it was more than just being a teacher. It was a calling, and making sure that they had opportunities to succeed, just like I had opportunities to succeed, based upon my mom and, great teachers that I had in my own life. And so I just wanted to make sure that each and every day that I was taking care of myself so I could come into the classroom and pour into my students. And it went beyond the classroom. Like I can tell you that, knowing their struggle and just what my struggle was growing up, it was always important to me to make sure that they were all right socially and emotionally before we even really started doing the academic piece. Like, you know what I mean? Because if they come in and they haven't eaten that day, or they come in and, maybe there was some trauma that was going on in their family the night before, I just wanted to always check in with them and make sure they were good socially and emotionally before we even started talking about the academic piece. So, there's an old cliche, and it's cliche, but it's very true. Kids don't care about how much you know. They just want to know how much you care. And so for me, it was just making sure that I always, impressed upon my students and even my student athletes that, hey, I care about you. I want the best for you. And, and that stuck with me for the 11 and a half years that I taught. But then even when I transitioned into administration, it was the same thing. It was like, hey, now I just don't have this micro lens of my classroom. Now I have the macro of the entire school. And how can I ensure that my teachers have that same sort of philosophy, just making sure that they really impress upon their students how much they care. And then it's so much easier for, to teach students when they know that you really care and want the best for them. So,
yeah. So how did that look in your classroom? I guess my other question would be, what kinds of classrooms and setups did you have when you were a special ed teacher? And then how would that look when you were with the checking in and making sure that you were addressing the social emotional needs
Sure.
in addition to the academic when you were in the teacher role? And then I'd be curious how you've transitioned to leading other people to do that.
Yeah, so I mean, you're talking about almost a 12-year career. So
Yeah.
some of that was
Start with
as a resource teacher,
Right.
pushing in and helping, and co-teaching with another teacher. So that's going to look different from when I was a self-contained EBD
Right.
teacher and it's just me and maybe a teacher assistant. So yeah, I think it just all depended upon, obviously, when I had 100% control of the class, then it was a totally different look, because I could check in with the students. And also, yeah, let me bring that up too. It depended on the level. I worked at the elementary level and the high school level, and the middle school level for that matter, as a special ed teacher. So it looked different based on those levels as well. But yeah, when I was working self-contained, it was a lot easier to have more of a routine in terms of checking in with the students and making sure that they had what they needed to be successful for that day. When it was resource, it was a little bit different because I was basically working from a cart, pushing into a classroom.
Yeah.
And, truthfully, in a lot of ways, I felt more like a teacher assistant in those situations. And that's unfortunate because it shouldn't be like that. But, I started teaching in 94. So these kind of things evolve. And so it's a lot more collaborative now,
Right.
in our day and age. But back in the 90s and the early 2000s, it wasn't like that. And so as a special ed teacher, when I was pushing in, I didn't really feel like I had control of the class. So it's a lot harder ask to do it with students and connect with students in that environment because I really was following the lead of the teacher, the content area teacher that I was supporting. And then they, a lot of times, wanted me to only focus on the students that were on my caseload, which I didn't like because it just singled out kids and it just wasn't good. But, like I said, how I was dealing with that in 98, would totally differ from what a teacher might experience as a special ed teacher now, because, we have evolved in terms of how we, work with students and things like that. So as an administrator, obviously, because I had those kind of experiences, it's easy for me to, share and impart the importance of, collaborative work, team teaching, co-teaching, because that model is more prevalent today than it was back then. We really do. We said it even then, but we really try to walk the talk now about the least restrictive environment for our students and making sure that they are definitely, getting or accessing their education with all of their peers. Whereas it was a lot easier and a lot more detrimental, in my opinion, to just kind of pull them out and not be a part of the full school experience. So I'm glad we've gotten away from that, but I really impress upon our teachers the importance of not singling out kids, even if they're pushing in and they're helping students in a classroom, that hey, you're helping everybody, right? Yeah, and Jamal knows that you're on his caseload, but everybody else in the class doesn't need to know, right? So
we're going to wrap up with a clip from episode 124, Meditation for Educators and the Art of Giving 85%, with Danny Bauer.
And it makes sense because when you're doing anything operationally, I could just imagine if you're exhausted and you have to think about something like that does require attention to detail, you're not going to be as effective if you haven't taken care of yourself when you do that thing. So it does make sense to put it in at the end once you've taken care of the other things and set the stage. It's almost like, in the space that I'm in, there's a lot of talk about, there's the executive functioning and attention piece, but then there's the learning of actual skills. And so we do have to set the stage and make sure that kids are paying attention. And then you do have to teach the skills, but you have to have both of them together at the same time. Otherwise, they're not going to work. One without the other one is just, it's not complete.
Right. I like that point you brought up, Karen. And the other thing too is like you're pouring and filling your cup. But the other thing is hopefully communication, academics, culture. Hopefully all those things also give you energy, because it's like, wow, we're doing some exciting stuff on campus. And now let's talk about like how it actually happens. But yeah, hopefully all those things are energy giving, not depleting.
Yeah. I think it's good for people to be aware of what is energy depleting and giving for them too, because I know it's different for
Yep.
different people.
For sure.
I know you mentioned meditating, and I have a love-hate relationship with meditation. So, and I've
Okay.
talked about that with other guests on the podcast, because I'm definitely a person who is sensory seeking and I like to move. And, I'm that person where it's like, I'm not getting anything done. I'm just sitting here. And even though I know scientifically that I will be more effective if I sit here and, do the meditation. So, I mean, what counts as meditating to you? What things, and what if, when you hear people say, I don't have time to meditate, what do you say to them?
Well, let me frame too, like who even cares what I think, but
Right.
maybe in a sense you should. I started taking meditation more seriously in 2016. So I've been doing it for quite a while now. And the reason why is we read a book in the mastermind where I serve school leaders, and the book was called Search Inside Yourself. And it's funny how everything's connected. That was written by a Google engineer, Chade Ming Tan, and helped start the company, but then was like running what became the most popular course for Google employees on campus, which was looking inside mindfulness and meditation, right? And then that's from what I understand, what he's focused on, and not with Google anymore. So my clients and school leaders really benefited from it. And I saw that I was benefiting from it too. Clarification. I am not even close to perfect. I am messing stuff up all the time, right? With that said, I have seen myself become less reactive, right? So we all have triggers and things that send us over the edge, right? Sometimes that happens in the classroom with a student. Maybe it's even just a stupid thing they say, and then a teacher set off, and actually, they're messing up the energy of the classroom because of how they responded and reacted, right? And when I figured that out, actually, as a teacher, I wasn't meditating at the time. I never wrote up a kid again when I became responsible for my own energy and presence. So less reactive, calmer, better ideas. I think generally like happier, more content, and curious just about experience, what's going on there. So been taking it seriously for a while. I've enrolled in a 2-year mindfulness and meditation certification program, which I'm in, and it's led by Jack Kornfield and Tara Brach, who are two huge people that really brought this West from the East. So they are great people to learn from. And I've done a 7-day silent meditation retreat where, Karen, all you do is meditate from when you wake up to when you go to bed. Now, it's not a whatever 12-hour or whatever it is meditation. It's broken up into chunks, right? You go sit in the hall and you meditate. Then you do walking meditation. Then you have a job. So you're doing cleaning, like I was doing cleaning meditation and, cleaning bathrooms.
That's interesting.
Talk about mindful eating. Yeah. Mindful eating, really just enjoying and slowing that whole process down. Especially because in America, I don't know if you realize this or not, but the rest of the world laughs at America in the sense of it's always so busy. And one of the only places in the world where people get coffee and don't sit down and enjoy it and savor that experience. They get coffee to rush to the next thing and drink the coffee as they're rushing.
Yeah.
What's the rush? It's part of meditation and mindfulness is what's the rush all about? Why are we doing? So I really resonate with that. And my practice has certainly deepened, and so I think what was the original question was why sort of meditate, especially when you feel like there's so much to get done. Was that right?
Yeah. I guess my would be a reframe for when people have that objection of, I don't have time to do this, because that's probably the number one objection I get to a lot of the things that I recommend that are those proactive things that don't have this immediate benefit or is hard to see the immediate benefit?
Hmm.
I mean,
So
what do you,
I guess the invitation would be, hey, uh, would you like a more enjoyable experience with this precious time you still have left? Because it
Mhm.
all ends for everybody, right? And it helps you slow down. My reply, you actually, I don't have time to meditate. You don't have time not to meditate. Like you really should start thinking about that, because we do so many things on automatic and unconsciously, right? Have you ever just like done something for whatever period of time and then been like, what was I just doing?
yeah, all the time.
Right. Yeah. So meditation's the kind of snap you out of that, like
Mhm.
to be in the moment, to yeah, say it, like I said, savor the coffee or whatever the experience is.
I like the idea of how you said that the eating meditation or the cleaning meditation. Why can't you be meditating when you're doing the dishes? Or I like to say, I'm just going to sit here and drink my coffee and space out for a few minutes, but that could be meditation or going for a
You
run
could
or a
turn it
walk.
into it for
Yeah.
sure. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely, 100%. Because I think the problem is, like, without a lot of definition around it and that kind of thing, maybe people just think meditation is, okay, I have to sit some type of way.
Mhm.
I have to have my hands, maybe I'm chanting something or
Right.
candles. Like, maybe, I mean, there's like a million ways to meditate, right? But I think at the core of what's going on, it's really about an awareness, a curiosity, and investigation of experience, right?
Mhm.
And so anyways, you could totally do that while sipping coffee or cleaning, and it's paying attention to thoughts. There's something when you start to meditate, there's something really powerful that happens, that you realize, oh, I am not my thoughts. I am not anger or jealousy or whatever, even happiness. These are things that kind of just flow through me, and then they're gone. Like
Mhm.
who or what is controlling all of this experience that actually influences a lot of what I do every day if I don't consciously think about it. So I'll end with the story. And if you have follow-up questions, that's totally fine. Like I can
Yeah.
really nerd out on this topic.
Mhm.
But the story is this, right? Something happened. I was profoundly upset, just a deep sorrow, right? Like the frog in your throat,
Mhm.
pit in your stomach type of sadness. And it hurt. And so instead of doing anything like lashing out or having a beer or I decided I'm going to meditate, right? I sit down and I meditate, and I'm just like observing the sadness and where do I feel it in my body and all this kind of stuff. And then I don't know when, let's just say it was 3 minutes, 5 minutes, I don't know. But at some point, my focus and attention went off of this sadness that I was experiencing. And it's spring, and I started hearing the chirp, chirp, chirp of the birds outside. And Mama Bird must have been bringing home worms and other goodies to her kids, because everybody was happy. It sounded like dinner time. And I realized I actually had a smile on my face now, listening to nature and these birds, right? And I'm like, oh, where'd the sadness go? And now I'm happy, right? Then at some point, I ended the meditation and I actually journaled about it. And then I realized as I was journaling, the sadness had come and gone. The happiness and joy that I experienced with the birds come and gone. Even the sound of the birds, that wasn't there anymore, right? Things come, they go. And that's one of the key components of Vipassana insight and, concentration meditation, is that everything's impermanent. You can't grasp, right? When you try to
Mhm.
grasp and hold on to stuff and make it stick around forever, it causes suffering. And so, yeah. All right. How's that for a little
Yeah.
meditation talk?
Yeah. I always, again, it's there's so much to this one, and what's, I think the interesting part of it is when you have this problem in front of you, and you're like, this is a problem, and you're trying to force it. You're trying to force the solution. And then it just comes to you when you're in the shower or something. And I think that sometimes people don't realize that in a way you're probably doing an element of meditation when you're doing those other mundane things, and you could easily turn it into that if you wanted to. And that it would, even though it feels like there's an impossible situation in front of you, that it will come to you. And that's where I struggle with it, because there's some times where it's like, I'm just supposed to go meditate when I have no idea how this solution is going to come. And so I think it's the uncertainty that's what gets to me. And I think that's what sometimes gets to other people, where it doesn't seem like it makes sense on the surface.
Yeah. Well, the invitation, and again, just tell me to shut up when I'm talking too much, but maybe the invitation for you, Karen, is like, don't sit and try to come up with a solution, right?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, let go of that. Don't grasp, oh, I need to figure something out. And kind of just sit back and observe what's going on. And just think, for you, the uncertain, you mentioned uncertainty. So I would invite you to just like, okay, what's that all about? Like, what happens next once you observe and put attention on uncertainty, right? Or do you feel uncertainty in your body somewhere? And what is that feeling, right? And look and put attention there. And then where does it go? What happens next?
So it's just like you're going around and to all these different places, from one place to another, just watching them come and go.
Yes, you got it.
Yeah. So I'm turning this into like a coaching session here.
I'm like really into it too. If you can't tell, I could like, we could really talk about this.
Are you a runner? Because I know you talked about Carl Lewis. And was that? Go ahead.
I have that story, not because I am a runner, and I'm certainly not a sprinter. Okay.
Yeah.
I'm a very slow, but will never quit runner, right? I've got incredible stamina, and I am not a sprinter like Carl Lewis, but part of that, I'd have to think about where I put it in the book, but I remember hearing a podcast between Tim Ferriss and Hugh Jackman, right? The guy who looks like Wolverine. Every guy is like, I want the Wolverine body, right? Good looking dude. And anyways, he mentioned this story that he heard about Carl Lewis's coach, and I'm just retelling what I heard from him. But Carl Lewis, right? Famous Olympian, American, and a sprinter. And I do remember him winning lots of gold medals. What I didn't remember until Jackman told the story is he consistently was out of the gates slow, right? And it's a sprint. You don't have that long to run the race. So his competition would be dusting him early, very early in the race. And the crowd, who didn't know that there was a very intentional approach that he was taking, that he learned from his coach, the crowd's like, oh gosh, like, is he going to win? Is it going to happen? The gold is on the line. And then at some point where his competition started to actually slow down because they started so fast, he just kept getting faster and faster and faster, and dusted them at the end, and racked up a whole bunch of gold medals in the result of his effort and career. So the idea that his coach gave him was, Carl, like, I want you actually to give 85% effort, right? And there's a few things going on there that translates to education. And again, me, working with school leaders, but you can't always be coming out of the gate so hard or for so long, right? All these things I talk about are connected. This is back to your energy, right? And you can't pour from an empty cup. So don't start out too fast and all that kind of stuff. Plus, when you're going that hard, 100%, or people say 110% or whatever, you actually like quite clenched up and rigid and inflexible, which is, in a physical competition leads to injury. In a work, like a mental job that we have, like as a school leader, we make poor decisions, maybe even stupid decisions when we're that rigid and inflexible. So that's a key idea that I do talk about in the book.
Yeah. I thought about that. So I read that and I thought immediately of Prefontaine. Are you familiar with Prefontaine at all? Who's another runner?
Right. Mustache, right?
Yep.
First, like
Yeah.
4 minute or
No, so
I
that
had that was
Roger
somebody else. Okay.
Bannister is the 4 minute mile guy, but Prefontaine is, so he was from University of Oregon, very involved with Nike. But his thing was, he used to say if the best pace is a suicide pace, then today is a good day to die. He would just go all out right away and just be like, let me see how far I can go until I just, hit the wall. And he got a lot of respect for it. But
for sure.
Yeah, I don't know that works when you're thinking about an entire school year. That kind of Prefontaine attitude of like all out until I just pass out.
I think, you bring up a good point, and if we connect to like sort of Eastern thinking, meditation, there's a good and a bad. There's a opposite in, the reaction, like a yin and a yang, like there's the duality of life, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like that's just, I have this, people can't see it, but on the podcast it says there's two sides to every coin, right? That's one of my values. And I realize when I'm afraid to do something, that means it's actually an exciting opportunity, right? I feel the fear. I'm about to speak to 500 people or whatever, right? My hands are getting sweaty and I'm like, oh my God, do they even want to hear what I have to say? Do I even know what I'm saying today? Like, all this stuff.
Yeah.
Or, whoa, what an opportunity to serve 500 people. So 85% is one end of the spectrum. Prefontaine, suicide mission, give it all you got. Maybe there's a season for everything, but I think we can agree one of them is way more sustainable. And in an industry where we're bleeding school administrators and teachers, right, like crazy, I think a sustainable solution is a smart one.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for listening. Be sure to check the show notes for all the resources that were mentioned in this episode. And be sure to check out the School of Clinical Leadership, my program that helps related service providers put executive functioning support in place in collaboration with their school teams using multiple service delivery models. So I show you how to do direct intervention, and I also show you how to coach and train others so that you can ensure students get support across their day. Remember that it helps me so much if you tell your friends and colleagues about De Facto Leaders, and if you follow me and leave me a rating or review wherever you listen to your podcasts, whether you listen on Apple or Spotify or another podcast network. And finally, if you're interested in collaborating with me, if you'd like to invite me to be on your podcast, if you would like to be a guest on De Facto Leaders, or if you have a suggestion for a guest for De Facto Leaders, please email me at talktome@drkarenspeech.com. As always, thank you so much for listening, and I will see you next time.